There we go. Wow. Isn't it amazing? This technology is wonderful when it works. And when it has a mind of its own, it doesn't. It doesn't. But anyway, we got through. We're here.
Yes.
Great. Well, welcome to Project 365. We were going to do it some way or another. How I didn't know, but we were going to do it. We were going to make sure this day was a day that you will receive a message of hope, encouragement, and or inspiration. And it is a blessing that we're here with you, and we're glad that you're here with us. Well, I'm Portia Wheatley. I am the president and founder of a nonprofit organization acknowledged as Trophy of Life Incorporated, where we have the opportunity to render hope, encouragement, and inspiration. That right there, I am so happy to do because I know it's a God assignment. And I pray that we are rendering the same to you. And I know you are a blessing to us. And with that blessing, we would love if you would go to our YouTube channel and subscribe so that you can assist us by bringing this word of hope, encouragement, and inspiration all around the world. And let's bring in my co-host.
Hello, everyone. I am Takira Swan. I am so happy to be here. We are pushing through despite any challenges that we may face. So we are so happy to be with you today.
Absolutely. And we will introduce our guest momentarily. But today, our topic is talking about policing and how we can bridge the gap between the community and the police department. You know, we've had so much that we've gone through in 2020, not just 2020. 2020 just brought it to light. And there were more incidents and accidents and events and all of that that happened with the community and the police. But years prior, there's been problems. There's been good policemen. There's been bad policemen, just like any other field of any professional field. But today we have in our presence Officer, or shall I say Captain Lawrence Hunter, who's been with the police department for over about 24 years, if not over that amount of years. So you know he has quite a bit of information that he can share with us, and it gives me a great opportunity to bring him to the platform so that we can hear how we can incorporate actions from the police department, as well as we come together and know that there is a meeting ground. There is something that we can do to support the policemen, those that are doing what they're supposed to do, as well as the community, those that are doing what they're supposed to do. So on that note, I'm going to release the platform to Captain Hunter. And Captain, help yourself and give us some information, give us some hope, encouragement, and inspiration.
Well, thank you so much to you, Miss Wheatley, and to you, Miss Swan, for having me on your program. I really, really appreciate it. I'm really humbled and honored to be here. Let me just start off by just kind of introducing myself. I am Lawrence Hunter. I'm a retired police captain from the city of Waterbury Police Department in Waterbury, Connecticut. I was born in the city of Boston, raised here in the city of Waterbury, where I still reside. Don't ask me why I'm still here, but I'm still here. So we call Waterbury, affectionately, we call it the dirty water. I won't get into why we call it that, but that's what we call it here. So I was, as I said, I was raised here. I went to public schools here. I then joined the police department at a fairly young age. I was 22 years old when I joined, and then I excelled to the rank of captain. Anyone who's not familiar with the rank structure of police departments and or the military goes from entry level patrol officer, police officer, and then the next rank is usually a sergeant. Some police departments have corporals. And so we go from sergeant to lieutenant and then to captain. Captain, in my particular department, I was a division commander. I was the midnight shift commander for quite some time, and I also was over the internal affairs department, what we called the professional standards, which was internal affairs as well as the training. That's what was my assignment. And then I finished as returning back to the midnight shift as the commander there. During my time, I was an implicit and bias instructor. I taught defensive tactics. I taught human behavior, which is essentially psychology, to police recruits as well as to members who are already on the department. In fact, the police department has just asked me to come back and teach some more classes due to what we'll talk about a little bit. Due to some of the programs or situations that have been going on around the country, the state of Connecticut has instituted 4 new classes that are mandatory, I believe, by the year 2022. But of course, many cities are getting ahead of it now. And there's about 4 classes. One is an anti-racism class, and these are for police recruits who are going to be police officers taught in the police academy. Anti-racism, history, uh, policing in a historical context in the civil rights movement. That's just one class. The history of policing in the civil rights movement, anti-racism, and procedural justice. And there's another class I forget. I'm going to be teaching procedural justice, and I'll touch upon these in a little bit. Procedural justice in the history class. So upon my retirement, I started a business. It's called LMH Consulting Services, where I do consulting about with police officers who are going to take promotional exams. Anyone who wants to become a police officer, I will work with you or with them who want to become police officers. I'm also teaching leadership, supervision principles, diversity and inclusion. And so those are just a little bit of my expertise. I'm probably leaving some things out, but that's just a little bit of about what I've done and what I'm doing today. I currently host a podcast called Captain Hunter's Podcast, where I focus on bridging the divide between the police and the communities that they serve. And so that's really has become a passion of mine. And how I started the particular consulting agency and the podcast that I currently host is because I looked around and saw that many African Americans, when I told them that I was a police officer, you either get, oh, hey, that's great, or you get, oh, that's, you get that kind of negative look, or some people just did not want to be around you at all as an officer. So that really kind of troubled me. So I did my own journey and into the history of policing. I did my own research, is what I meant. I did my journey into the history of policing. Why the African American community in particular has such a problem with what's going on. And so, once I started to look into things, I don't know if anyone will remember back in the 1990s, the end of the 1990, 97, and 99 in particular, there were 2 incidents in the state of New York. There was the Abner Louima situation, and I forget the other young man's name, but they were both brutalized by the police and or killed. So when that happened, I was a young officer myself. I came out in 1995. I became a police officer in 1995. So 2 years in, in 97, I was dealing with a situation, and then 2 years later in 99, I dealt with another situation. Uh, and Connecticut is in New York is Connecticut in New York City are fairly close in proximity. So a lot of people were calling me up and asking me, what's up with this? How come the police are doing this type of thing? Why are you guys doing this? And there's always this need to say it's you guys, it's all of you guys, or you guys are all hiding, behind this blue wall, a blue shield. And so that was very troubling to me because I know that I wasn't one of those people who were doing that, and it's a shame as you mentioned, Miss Wheatley, that when there's bad so-called apples in every profession, right? There's teachers who right now are unfortunately sleeping with their students, but no one is blaming all teachers for this type of thing. There's politicians who are on the take, but no one's blaming well, maybe some of us are blaming all politicians. That's probably a bad example, but anyway, so we try not to paint with a broad brush. So I really wanted to bring this to a light and really try to get the community to be in line and in lockstep with the public. I really believe, as you said, that we need the police. The police are essentially a good force, but we need effective and good police officers who are following the aims of procedural justice. So let me just talk a little bit about procedural justice and what that means. And this is really going to be helpful because I have to teach this class, and so I have to really kind of get my mind around it. So procedural justice means that there's a certain set of standards that departments will follow when and if any type of call comes in for service, or if there is a complaint process that they want to follow. So let's just say, for example, that procedural justice, there's a situation in which we need procedural justice when and if there's a situation where a domestic violence call has taken place. The police officers should respond to that call, and they should ask a certain line of questioning, do a certain set standard of investigations, and then come to a conclusion that is to the benefit of both parties. Now, that benefit is probably maybe the wrong word, but it should be to the satisfaction of both parties, even if that ends in arrest. And so, what many times what happens, well, I should not say many times, but what happens in some cases is that that procedural justice, that procedure of going about these different steps that I've outlined, and of course, there's many more in there, is not followed by police officers. They cut corners. They don't ask the right questions. They just get there, and because they're tired, because it's almost time for them to go home, so therefore they don't follow those rules of procedural justice. And when officers don't follow that line of procedural justice, then the members of the community will look at the department as illegitimate. What do I mean by illegitimate? Doesn't mean that they don't believe the police department should exist or does exist, but what it means is that they believe that they're corrupt. It means that they know that when we call the police, they don't listen to my side of the story. When we call the police, they have their own preconceptions and misconceptions about the African American community, about the poor white communities, about the Hispanic community. And so because they have this misconception, they're not listening to us and to our complaints, and they're just jumping to conclusions. They're making arrests without listening to our story. And what happens a lot of times when people feel as if they're not being heard and you're not listening to my side of the story, this is where we get people acting out. This is where we get people who resist police officers, who want to run away from police officers because you have not listened to them, because the officers had not listened to them and taken the time and the opportunity to get to the bottom to the bottom of the situation. Therefore, that decreases the morale for the community. It decreases police legitimacy. It decreases your sense, the department's sense of procedural justice. So, so one of the things that I really want to bring about is bringing that divide is making sure the police officers are held accountable and they follow a strict set of procedural justice. Procedural justice also means that, as I mentioned, I was the commander of our internal affairs division. That means that when and if someone comes in to make a complaint about a police officer, that again, there is a certain set of standards and rules that the police department must follow. And these are becoming standardized across the country and across different states, where police officers will have the right to review the complaint against them. Well, let me start with the civilians. The civilians should make a complaint. Uh, it should not be the police officers or commanders or sergeants' job to talk citizens out of making a complaint. It may not even be appropriate for the commander whoever they're speaking with, the civilian is speaking with at the time, to try to talk them out of it, talk to them at all, or try to figure out what's going on, because people may get the sense that this officer who I'm speaking with right now is just going to protect his friend, his buddy, and he's not going to look out. If I make this complaint, he's just going to go tell him, and they're going to get their story straight. So I think it's really, and this is all part of the procedural justice type of thing, right? A certain set of ways of how we go about investigating these things. Second of all, or next of all, I should say, is that police officers and departments must fully investigate any officer for any reason, for any misconduct. A lot of times, police officers and police departments in the past, and probably still going on today, would not take seriously a complaint and would not investigate a complaint if the complaint was not written down and or notarized. So that sometimes that would be a complete disadvantage to the people. Let's just say I come in, I come into the police department and say, listen, officer so and so, slap me around for no reason. And then then the supervisor says, well, okay, well, what happened? You're probably making this up. Well, to give us the officer's name, and officer so and so would never do this type of thing. I've known officer so and so for the past 10 years. He's a good officer. He would never do this type of thing. Right there, that tells the civilian, the citizen, that they're not going to take this complaint seriously. So there has to be a certain set of procedures. It has to be transparent. What do I mean by that? So any and every step along the investigation should be documented and should be, and the department should notify the citizen, the civilian, of the complaint process, where we are in the process, and when and if we plan to complete the process. And once the process is completed, again, more notifications should go out saying this is what we have found, and here's the reasons that we found this. It wasn't just that we found your complaint was unfounded, but why do we find it? Maybe video evidence completely contradicted your story, or complete video evidence confirmed your story, and now we're going to take disciplinary action against these people. So let me just speak a little bit about disciplinary action. Um, and many times it becomes very frustrating to citizens and civilians when and if they make a complaint against a police officer and they feel as if nothing happens. One of the reasons that they feel that nothing happens, and I'm putting that in quotations, right? So maybe it's something that we as citizens, because I am a citizen now, I'm just a regular civilian now. So many times we think that this happened and the police officer should be fired, right? This guy, this gal should not be a police officer. How the way he talks to the public, the way he interacts with the public, he has no business wearing the badge. Well, a lot of times, what is hampering and hindering city managers, city and police executives from taking the appropriate action is the fact that unions are so strong. So, because of these union red tape, because of the union lawyers, because of the unions themselves, they are very reluctant to stand behind, or they were very reluctant to take any type of action that we would think should be warranted. So, along those lines, I would say to people out there that you should become familiar with your city rules, your city management, understand the power of your city union, your police union. And listen, we're all pro-union. As a union employee myself, I'm very much pro-union, not just police union, but unions across the country. I think that more unions should be standing up for workers' rights and all that. However, I do think that in the case of police officers, and this is going to be very unpopular that I'm saying this, the power of the union needs to be taken down a little bit, because it is causing such a divide. Again, when something happens and people don't feel as if they're getting justice, and they feel as if the the process is being tainted. Let me give a perfect example of this. In the case of now George Floyd, which we are all fairly familiar with, last year, about was it May or so of 2020, we all saw what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. George Floyd was killed by the police officer Derek Chauvin, and so on. So in that case, I actually listened to a press conference. It wasn't even a press conference. It was a Zoom call in which the chief of police for the Minneapolis Police Department, a man of color himself, gave a briefing. Essentially about what's going on in the reforms that the Minneapolis Police Department was going to take. And he said very plainly during that conference that his hands were tied concerning Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin was the officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck. So what happened is that even though Derek Chauvin was a 20-year veteran, even though he had items in his jacket or his personnel file that were negative, the police chief could not take corrective action against them. And I myself was extremely critical in my podcast when I talked about that. It's like, why was this guy not taken care of, taken off the street, and all this kind of stuff. But when listening to the chief and understanding that different cities have different rules and different strengths to their unions, therefore I had to listen to the chief and say, you know what, this is part of the problem. Where number one, we're so bifurcated as police departments. If I'm living in Minnesota, the rules may be different if I'm living in Maryland. And so the strength of the union. So I think that's a problem within police departments. There's 18,000 police departments or sheriff's departments in this country, ranging from great big departments like LA and NYC all the way down to 1 and 2 person officers. So there's a great range of police departments. They're not all in the same rules and regulations and all that. So, and of course, as I was talking about with the union strengths and everything. So the police chief of Minneapolis, Minnesota, was unable to take certain corrective actions as far as reassignments or disciplinary actions against this particular officer because of the strengths of the union. And that's something that I think that needs to be fought against. So I talked about police unions. I talked about a little bit about the complaint process. Well, let me talk a little bit more about the complaint process. If and when you as an individual feel that you are wronged, I stress highly, and I cannot say this enough, that you should not try to take up court on the side of the road or in the middle of the street. We have a saying that you should comply now and complain later. take down badge numbers, that you should get car information. You should know what street you are on, know the time of day, get the best description of the officer or officers as possible, their hair color, their height, their approximate weight, their badge number. Ask them for their badge number in a kind, in a courteous way, despite and no matter how they may be speaking to you. Taking up getting antsy on the side of the road and getting a mouthy on the side of the road is never a good idea. I do realize that many people are videotaping now, but who wants to go through the troubles and trials of an arrest, being dragged out of your car and trying to catch it on videotape? I don't think that that's worth it. Catch the indiscretions if you can on videotape. So, and then get as much information, time of day, location that you're at, and all that kind of stuff. The car that you're driving, and bring all that information down to the police department. Make your complaint there. If you have to get it notarized or follow those particular rules, I don't think that that's fair that people have to get these things notarized. We, as my department, if any complaint came in via email, somebody called in, we took the complaint seriously and we addressed the complaint. It did not have to be notarized. However, that's not every single department. As I said, every department has different rules and regulations. Let me know how I'm doing for time, please. So I think that so that's the complaint process, and then follow up the complaint process. As I mentioned, many departments will keep persons informed along the way as to where they're at in the complaint process. Many departments have rules. You have to complete your complaint process. Ours was 45 days. So from 45 days from the time you can complaint, you had to complete the process. So that's the complaint process. And let me just talk a little bit about bridging the divide and what I think that's important.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
it's obviously important because nobody suffers more than this whole situation of defunding the police than Black communities. Let's just be honest about that. If the police fail to do their jobs, if they refuse to do their job, they want to go out and just sit in the parking lot and not be proactive, um, and then nobody's going to suffer besides more than Black people. So we want Black uh, Black people want and should want police officers in the community, protecting the community. We just want fair, impartial, good policing, and that's what we want. So I think it's really, really important that people engage with the community. That means go to the community meetings. That means go to, if your department has a civilian review board, sign up for a civilian review board. If your police department has a civilian police academy, sign up for that. That would be, where you can go and learn the laws and learn about what the police officers do. Many people think that they know what cops should do, should not do. I've talked to people with a bachelor's degrees in criminal justice, not working in the field, but they just had a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and telling me completely wrong information. So just so you have to. So I would say engage with your department, and so just know what your department does. Don't be afraid to make complaints and everything like that. Become involved in the voting process, whether you have to vote for your sheriffs, vote for your prosecutors. Engage and vote. Engage and vote. Speak to them, ask for meetings with these people, and of course vote these people. You become involved in politics and vote these sheriffs or police chiefs or mayors. If the mayor is corrupt, and he's got corrupt police department where they think these things are going on, then make sure that you try to get these people out of office. And so that's what I think that many civilians and citizens should do. And finally, let me just end off with I try to attack it from the police officer's point of view, but I also am really, really getting heavy into community activism and what we need to do as community. We need to build strong communities. We need Black men, Black fathers in the homes. We need to develop our own businesses where we're in our own communities where we can support our own businesses. We need entrepreneurs. And once we develop economic capital, then we can develop that political capital, right? So, who is running the world? Well, it's the politicians, and the politicians are many times in the pocket of the people of the wealthy class. So we have to build up a wealthy class. And how do we do that? Well, we have to, again, create strong families, strong churches, strong community centers, who then implement those types of changes in thought process into their children, who grow up to be entrepreneurs. And once we do those things, then we limit people's engagement and involvement with the police. That's just the truth. When
Mhm.
people have jobs and they're at work and where they're going to college and when they're building their businesses, they're not running the streets and running away from the police. That they're living much better lives, and we can build up our communities that way, and we can get people off of social programs, and we can encourage people, and we can lift the self-esteem and all that type of thing. So that's what my podcast is about. It's about bridging the divide. The police, in many instances, have to do better in the community, whether it be Black, Asian, Hispanic, white, all have to do better. And so that's the way I'm trying to bridge the divide.
Great, great, great information, because it is the responsibility of the community as well as the police on both sides. So I have Porter Brown in the chat room who says, so how do we get more young people to join the force and be part of the solution? We want more offices. We want more officers to look like us, but we do not join the force.
That's an excellent question, and that's one that I've gone back and forth with. I was, as part of my responsibilities, I was at one time tasked with the recruiting process. Went to local colleges, went to barbershops, went to churches, and you'd be surprised of how many people who supposedly, well, not supposedly, who do look like us, who said, "Listen, I'm not interested." One guy said to me, "Yeah, I'm going to college." Well, listen, I'm in the college. I know that you're going here. I mean, so it's,
Mhm.
so it really is a problem where people are not joining the police department. Because of the viral videos, because of the many things that are going on around the country, many people are just not joining the police department, period. And if they are, they're probably joining for negative reasons. And well, not negative reasons, but they're joining just for a paycheck and for good benefits, not really because they want to help the community. And so it is important that we encourage people to do that. So how do we do that? So it's important for persons such as myself who look like me to go out there and embrace the community and say, hey, listen, the police department can make your life better, and you can make the community better. It's also important, and again, I'm going to address this from the community aspect. You can't down the police. If you're at the Thanksgiving or Christmas or birthday parties, don't talk about the police in a negative way in front of your 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. That's incredibly important. We can't do that. You can't down the police and say they're corrupt and say they're negative, and then expect your nieces and nephews and cousins to want to
To
become part of
respect.
these
Mhm.
organizations. So stop doing that. So if anything, say, okay, talk about what's going on and say how we can make the community better. And how can we make the community better? We need you, nephew. We need you, niece. We need you, cousin, to join that police department and move up the ranks in those police departments and then straighten them out. So that's the process that I would say to do it. I encourage people to do it. The police officers are out there recruiting. There's some posters, some commercial, etc. But it's up to us to say we got to make these things better.
Good, good. Yeah, and all of this starts really in the family gatherings, family conversations. And yeah, I agree with that in the sense of you can't sit around and say negative things and then want a positive return on some of the negative things that's been said. But thank you so much for that information that has been shared. And at this time, usually I have my co-host to come in to prepare some closing statements. And it's amazing how each generation is, again, responsible for producing positive young people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely
Absolutely.
positive young people. And it, again, it starts in the family. So those conversations, and even in the church, even in the neighborhood, we can all do something. And I know I had someone here in the chat room that says, and I think we said it in conversation, we cannot judge across the board. Everyone, well, not everyone, but in each entity, there are some good and there are some bad. So, but I appreciate your services, even though you're in Connecticut.
Well, listen, everything's virtual now. I'll help
You're
anyone
right.
out anytime.
You're
So
right.
do not be afraid to say, I'm in California. I'm in Maryland. Listen,
But police
everything's
are the
virtual.
police, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you want my services, hit me up, and I would certainly You can fly me out there, which would be great. But but certainly everything is virtual now anyway. So
And we'll make sure your podcast information gets into our chat room so that in the comment section on Facebook, in the chat room on Zoom, so that if anyone wants to contact you for advice or just to listen to what you have to say, we'll make sure they get that information.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Takira?
Okay, so one, I want to commend you for being the outstanding man that you are in taking this head on and doing the right thing to try to combat the divide between the police and the community. That's a really big job. And I know it's uphill climb and it's not easy, but I really commend you for your efforts so far and what you're doing. I do have a question. Like you said, you know, the police departments all over our nation are always recruiting. Is there a point in the recruitment or hiring process that happens that enables the person who's doing the hiring to kind of filter out the bad apples? You know, like saying, okay, so this person's mindset may not be the best for, you know, for this particular job, or we can see from whatever the processes are that this person may need another field because they're not really here to help people, and we're trying to make a change, you know, to bridge the divide, and it's not going toward our goal. Is there a process that happens currently?
Absolutely, absolutely. I just are we on a time limit? I don't know. I don't want to. I
No.
don't want.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. So let me just talk about the. That's an excellent question. So and let me just talk about the process, to testing process. So generally, again, there's many, 50 states, and they all have different, requirements and things like that. So excuse me, I'm getting a phone call here. I apologize. So these departments all have different ways of going about everything. So generally there's a 50 a the first part is a written exam, and the written exam is going to take care of the um the written exam is going to take care of the academic portion of it. The next portion of it is going to be an oral examination, and from there they want to know if people have if they're able to speak and talk. Now we get into the nitty gritty, and these necessarily may not be in the direct line of every department may do it differently. So let's just say you passed the written exam. Now you pass the oral portion, or the oral board examination, where you go before a panel of people and talk about and say, they're going to ask you questions, you're going to answer the questions. So now you have a polygraph test, and they're going to want to know, are you truthful about your past? So they're going to ask you different questions. Now, before the polygraph is usually a background investigation. Now, all this background may be going on at the same time. They're going to ask you about your history. They may ask you about your tattoos. They're going to ask you what school you went to, what military career, your jobs, where you've lived. They're going to talk to your friends and your neighbors and your cousins and all that type of thing. So that's part of the background investigation. That's going to every single part of this process is weeding people out. Then, of course, during that, usually after the background, then it's a polygraph examination, as I mentioned, lie detector tests, essentially, where they want to know if you've been telling the truth about anything that's going on in your past. Then they're going to ask you. Then you're going to go through a psychological examination, and this is more to your point. There is this part of the process that's going to eliminate people who are unfit for the job because they're too hyper or too timid or too aggressive or whatever, or too assertive. So that that particular examination should weed people out. And then, of course, there is a physical examination along the way to make sure that you're physically fit to be able to stand the rigors of being a police officer. And so that's essentially the process of becoming the police officer in the United States.
Okay. And I have just one more question. So
I don't charge for the questions.
I'm gonna have to tune into your podcast, because this is such a big issue that affects all of us, whether we want to admit it or not. The next, I just lost my train of thought. The next question. Oh, if you could please repeat or just tell everyone where they could go to find out the rules for their particular area. Like you said, you get to know all the rights of you as a citizen, and what the police are being upheld as, because you can't make any changes. Like I always say, you can't win the game if you don't know the rules. So you need to know how these things work, because just as simple as making, oh, I want to make a complaint, well, how come it didn't get anywhere, well, I didn't know it had to do A, B, and C, so I feel like a lot of times change doesn't happen because it's so much work and you just get a little discouraged, like, well, it's not going to change anyway. But it doesn't have to be that way. So if you can just say, where people can research or go look to find those rules or regulations, then that would be helpful.
Sure. Many police departments are putting their department rules and regulations or policies and procedures, whatever people are calling them, online. And so I would go to your local police department's website. We should all have one. It's 2021. They should have a website, and go there and see. If it's not there, then I would call the chief's office and ask him. I'm looking for the procedures on how to make a complaint. Is there a way that I can get these things written down? What are the rules? What are the complaint processes? And if you can't get it from the chief's office, or if they're slow in responding, maybe the town clerk, the mayor, go to them and say, listen, what's up with this? I want to file a complaint, or I just want to know what the rules are, regulations are. It's not just about making a complaint. Sometimes people have their cars towed by the police and they don't know how to get it back. They should have, again, procedural justice, policies and procedures. The police department should have rules about how they go about towing people's motor vehicles, or taking your dog if it bit someone. So that this should all be written down. It should be available online. If it's not, again, call the chief's office, or email them, or go to the town manager, city manager, mayor's office, etc.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just want to encourage all of our viewers to do your research. Just take a couple minutes out, find out the rules and regulations for your area, for your city, for anything. Law and order, whether you like it or not, is necessary for our society. It's always going to be here. It's always been in our lives, one way or another. So I would encourage you just to find out the rules so that you can know how to operate safely and effectively, especially if you'd like to make change for something that you dislike. So,
absolutely.
Right. Great information. Great information. And then from this video, there are several that have already said that they've gone to your podcast to check you out. They enjoyed this information today. And those that are in the Maryland area, just know you have a place where you can get information as well regarding your area policing. And with this podcast that Captain Hunter has, it will give you so much more information. So don't be afraid to tap in to see what you can hear, listen to, what you can learn. All of that, I'm sure that will be found on his podcast. So I want you to remember to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, because you will see Captain Hunter there. And there are people that should have this information in hand. There are people that have young people that need to know what to do, not just young Black men. Everybody needs to know what to do. Anytime you've been wronged by the policeman, or you feel you have been wronged by the policeman, you have somewhere that you can go, at least be knowledgeable of what you need to do as a citizen. But there's information out there for you to obtain. So we thank you again, Captain Hunter, for the information that you shared. Those that go to our YouTube channel, just know you help us to take this video, this information around the world. And there are many people, especially in the southern states, that still don't know how to report something that's important to them, or that has happened to them, that they just need to let the captain know, to let the chief know, to let the sheriff know, this officer did this to me and it was not right. So just don't hold on to it. And then that builds up within. And then when a policeman stops you, you blow your lid. So no, let's do what we have to do as citizens, as civilians, and make people pay if you have any control at all. But let's do it the right way. Let's do it the lawful way. All right. Again, I want you to be intentional about fulfilling God's purpose on your life. You got to do it. It may not be what I do. It may not be what Captain Hunter does. It may not be what Takira does as well as she does it. But I want you to make sure you be intentional about fulfilling God's purpose on your life. Thank you for tuning in, and we shall see you tomorrow. God bless, Captain Hunter. Bye,
Thank you.
Takira.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.